The Sage of Ages, The Full Story of Luqman al-Hakim. Part 1, The Dust of Nubia. A cinematic opening, a wide shot of the Nile River as the sun sets, casting a golden hue over the ancient landscape of the 11th century BC. The sound of water lapping against the shore and distant labor songs. A narrator, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Our story begins in a time of great upheaval, nearly 3,000 years ago, in the upper basin of the Nile. This is the land of Nubia, modern-day Sudan and southern Egypt. While the pharaohs built monuments of stone to immortalize their names, a child was born whose immortality would be of the spirit. His name was Luqman. He was not born into silk or power. He was born into the yoke of slavery. History and Islamic tradition agree. Luqman was a man of African descent, born with dark skin, thick lips, and a frame that society deemed lowly. But within this simple exterior lay a heart that Allah would choose to honor with a surah in the Holy Quran. A visual, a young boy sitting in the shade of a plane tree, watching the movement of ants and the swaying of tall grass. In ancient Nubia, slavery was a byproduct of the endless wars between the north and south. It was not a race-based caste system, but one of circumstance. Luqman's father, Bora, was one of thousands taken captive. As Luqman grew, he did not play like other children. He was a creature of silence and observation. A scholarly insight. Most scholars, including Ibn Kathir and Tabari, agree that Luqman was not a prophet, but a waliya, a saintly servant granted hikmah, wisdom. While prophets receive wahy, divine revelation, through angels, Luqman received inspiration through the deep contemplation of the universe. Part 2, The Language of the Earth. A visual, Luqman as a young man, working as a shepherd in the rugged mountains. He touches a plant, and the screen subtly glows. A narrator, by the age of 17, while working as a shepherd, Luqman's silence began to bear fruit. He realized that the world was speaking to him. Just as Prophet Sulaiman would later understand the language of animals, Luqman began to understand the language of plants. A tradition tells us that every urban root would whisper its purpose to him. One would say, "I am a cure for the heart," while another would say, "I can cool the fever." He discovered that Allah had placed a cure for 770 kinds of human suffering within the vegetation of the earth. A visual, a scene of a marketplace. Luqman is surrounded by villagers seeking cures. In the shadows, a group of envious magicians watches. As fame grew, and with fame came envy, the local magicians, who made their living through deception, saw Luqman as a threat to their business. It was during this time that one of the most famous tests of his wisdom occurred. At the scene of the sheep, his master, attempting to test his intellect, asked him to slaughter a sheep and bring back the two best parts. Luqman returned with the heart and the tongue. Later, the master asked for the two worst parts. Again, Luqman brought the heart and the tongue. Luqman, "O master, there is nothing better than these two when they are pure, and nothing worse than these two when they are wicked." Part 3, The Chains of the Wise. A visual, a montage of Luqman being captured, chained, and imprisoned in a dark Egyptian dungeon. A narrator, Luqman's path was one of repeated struggle. He was freed from his first master, but like Prophet Yusuf, as before him, he found himself a prisoner in Egypt under the pharaoh. He was chained 3 times throughout his long life, and each time, his escape was not through violence, but through the divine intervention of his patience. He spent years in prison, using the time for deep worship and healing his fellow inmates. As the great poet Rumi would later say, Luqman was cooked hardened and perfected by the fires of tribulation until his wisdom was as sharp as a diamond. Part 4, The Sage and the King. A visual, the lush hills of Palestine. An older, majestic Luqman meets Prophet Dawood. As a narrator, after his release from Egypt, Luqman traveled north to the land of Palestine. It was here that he met Prophet Dawood. This was a legendary meeting, a prophet king and a wise saint. A visual, Dawood is softening iron with his hands, weaving a suit of mail. Luqman watched Dawood perform the miracle of softening iron. He was curious and wanted to ask what Dawood was making, but his hikmah told him to wait. Luqman, to himself, wisdom is not to rush, wisdom is to remain silent at the right time. When Dawood finished and put on the armor, explaining it was for protection in battle. Luqman realized he had learned the secret of the craft simply by watching. He then added his famous words, "Silence is wisdom, but very few people do it." Part 5, The Search for the Secret of Life. A visual. A storm on the Mrs. Bridge in Adana, Turkey. Luqman is desperately reaching for a notebook falling into the water. A narrator. Perhaps the most mysterious chapter of Luqman's life is his search for the elixir of long life. Some say he lived for 1,000 years. Some say he lived as long as 7 eagles. In the Anatolian region of Adana, it is believed he finally found the plant that could stop aging. He wrote the formula in his notebook, but as he crossed the Mrs. Bridge, a divine wind, some say sent by an angel, blew the book into the river. Allah had decreed that while Luqman would have a long life, true immortality belongs only to the Creator. Part 6, The Father's Legacy. Surah Luqman. A visual. A beautiful sunset. Luqman is walking with his son, speaking gently. A narrator. The pinnacle of Luqman's story is preserved in the Quran. His advice to his son is a blueprint for all of humanity. At the core of faith. "O my son, do not join others in worship with Allah. Shirk is a great injustice." At the observation of deeds, he taught his son that even a deed as small as a mustard seed is known to Allah. At the social balance, lower your voice, he said, for the harshest of sounds is the braying of the donkey. He taught humility over arrogance. Part 7, The Final Breath. A visual. Various locations of his attributed graves. Tarsus, Palestine, Yemen. A narrator. Luqman passed away having served as a judge for the children of Israel for centuries. Whether he is buried in the Alu Mosque of Tarsus or the hills of Palestine, his real grave is the hearts of those who seek wisdom.